Right, we are live.
Okay, hello, welcome. Welcome, Heather. And I'm Blake, and we're welcoming you to Storyboard. It's our new internet show where we share art and classic children's stories. Doesn't everybody like a story? That's what I believe. I love children's stories. And Heather and I have found some old stories that um, they've been around for a long time, and I think a lot of people maybe haven't heard some of these. And it's really fun to kind of encounter these old stories. And Heather, as I read the story, Heather will illustrate. So it's part story and part art is what we are up to. And so I'm Blake Spencer, and I'm with Heather Warburton. So Heather, what do you have to say this
Yep.
morning?
So last time we started reading the Velveteen Rabbit, and we got through kind of the first half of the story, and I got most of a drawing in, but I wasn't quite finished yet. So I did finish out the full render of it. So I've got that to show everyone today. I'm just going to pop that up on the screen here.
Dum dum dum.
Yep, and there we go. That was the
There it
finished
is.
render of the little Velveteen Rabbit meeting a real rabbit out in the world. And, the real rabbits weren't so nice to the Velveteen Rabbit when they met him that first time. They maybe at first thought he was a real rabbit, but then they're like, oh, well, you don't have legs and
Yeah, the
you're,
back leg
you
thing.
can't jump around like we can. So, although he knew he was real in his heart, the real rabbits didn't quite get it yet that he was a real rabbit too.
Yeah, I liked that moment where he realized, I don't have back legs like that real rabbit. And he kept pushing the other, I'm not going to hop. I'm just going to be here. But it
Yeah, I'm
is.
just gonna hang out here and chill.
Mhm. But it was all about becoming real. That's the story. And the Velveteen Rabbit already knows that there's realness in that little bunny heart because the bunny has already experienced love, what it means to be loved by another. And so, are we ready to pick up?
Yeah, we are
Because the
ready
last
to.
part, we read half the story and we got right to that moment where the boy becomes ill. And that's exactly the last sentence we read. And then one day, the boy was ill. His face grew very flushed, and he talked in his sleep. And his little body was so hot that it burned the rabbit when he held him close. Strange people came and went into the nursery, and a light burned all night. And through it all, the little velveteen rabbit lay there, hidden from sight, under the bedclothes, and he never stirred. For he was afraid that if he found him, someone might take him away. And if he knew that the boy, and he knew that the boy needed him. It was a long, weary time, for the boy was too ill to play, and the little rabbit found it rather dull and nothing to do all day long. But he snuggled down patiently and looked forward to the time when the boy should be well again. And they would go out into the garden amongst the flowers and butterflies and play splendid games in the raspberry thicket like they used to. All sorts of delightful things he planned, and while the boy lay half asleep, he crept up close to the pillow and whispered them into his ear. And presently, the fever turned, and the boy got better. He was able to sit up in bed and look at picture books while the little rabbit cuddled close at his side. And one day, they let him get up and dress. It was a bright, sunny morning, and the window stood wide open. They had carried the boy out onto the balcony wrapped in a shawl, and the little rabbit lay tangled up among the bedclothes, thinking. The boy was going to the seaside tomorrow. Everything was arranged, and now it only remained to carry out the doctor's orders. They talked about it all while the little rabbit lay under the bedclothes with just his head peeping out, listening. The boy was to be, the room was to be disinfected, and all the books and toys that the boy had played with in the bed must be burnt. Hooray, thought the little rabbit. Tomorrow we shall go to the seaside. For the boy had often talked of the seaside, and he wanted very much to see the big waves coming in, and the tiny crabs, and the sand castles. Just then, Nana caught sight of him. How about this old bunny? She asked. That, said the doctor, why, it's a mass of scarlet fever germs. Burn it at once. What? Nonsense. Get him a new one. He mustn't have that any more. And so the little rabbit was put in a sack with the old picture books and a lot of rubbish and carried out to the end of the garden behind the fowl house. That was a fine place to make a bonfire, only the gardener was too busy just then to attend to it. He had the potatoes to dig and the green beans to gather, but next morning he promised to come quite early and burn the whole lot. That night, the boy slept in a different bedroom, and he had a new bunny to sleep with him. It was a splendid bunny, all white, plush, with real glass eyes, but the boy was too excited to care very much about it. For tomorrow he was going to the seaside, and that in itself was such a wonderful thing that he could think of nothing else. And while the boy was sleeping, dreaming of the seaside, the little rabbit lay among the old picture books in the corner behind the fowl house, and he felt very lonely. The sack had been left untied, and so by wiggling a bit, he was able to get his head through the opening and look out. He was shivering a little, for he had always been used to sleeping in a proper bed, and by this time his coat had worn so thin and threadbare from hugging that it was no longer any protection to him. Nearby, he could see the thicket of raspberry canes growing tall and close like a tropical jungle, in whose shadows he had played with the boy, on bygone days. He thought of those long sunlit hours in the garden, how happy they were, and a great sadness came over him. He seemed to see them all pass before him, each more beautiful than the one before, the fairy huts in the flower bed, the quiet evenings in the wood when he lay in the bracken and the little ants ran over his paws, the wonderful day when he first knew that he was real. He thought of the skin horse, so wise and gentle, and all that he had told him. Of what use was it to be loved and lose one's beauty and become real if it all ended like this? And a tear, a real tear, trickled down his little shabby velvet nose and fell to the ground. And then a strange thing happened. For where the tear had fallen, a flower grew up out of the ground, a mysterious flower, not at all like any that grew in the garden. It had slender green leaves, the color of emeralds, and in it, the center of the leaves, a blossom like a gold cup. It was so beautiful that the little rabbit forgot to cry and just lay there watching it. And presently the bloom opened, and out of it there stepped a fairy. She was quite the loveliest fairy in the whole world. Her dress was of pearl and dewdrops, and there were flowers around her neck and in her hair, and her face was like the most perfect flower of all. And she came so close to the little rabbit and gathered him up in her arms and kissed him on his velveteen nose that was all damp from crying. Little rabbit, she said, don't you know who I am? The rabbit looked up at her, and it seemed to him that he had seen her face before, but he couldn't think where. I'm the nursery magic fairy, she said. I take care of all the playthings that the children have loved. When they're old and worn out and the children don't need them anymore, then I come and take them away with me, and then they turn into real. Wasn't I real before? Asked the little rabbit. You were real to the boy, the fairy said, because he loved you. Now you shall be real to everyone. And she held the little rabbit close in her arms and flew with him into the wood. It was light now, for the moon had risen. All the forest was beautiful, and the fronds of the bracken shone like frosted silver. In the open glade between the tree trunks, the wild rabbits danced in their shadows on the velvet grass. But when they saw the fairy, they all stopped dancing and stood round in a ring to stare at her. I brought you a little playfellow, said the fairy. You must be very kind to him and teach him all he needs to know in Rabbit Land, for he is going to live with you forever and ever. And she kissed the little rabbit again and put him down on the grass. Run and play, little rabbit, she said. But the little rabbit sat still for a moment and never moved. For when he saw all the wild rabbits dancing around him, he suddenly remembered about his hind legs, and he didn't want them to see that he was made all in one piece. He did not know that when the fairy kissed him that last time, she changed him altogether, and he might have sat there a long time, too shy to move, if just then something hadn't tickled his nose. And before he thought what he was doing, before he thought what he was doing, he lifted his hind toe to scratch it. And he found that he actually had hind legs. Instead of dingy velvet, he had brown fur, soft and shiny. His ears twitched by themselves, and his whiskers were so long that they brushed the grass. He gave one leap, and the joy of using those hind legs was so great that he went springing about the turf on them, jumping sideways and whirling around as the others did. And he grew so excited that when at last he did not look for the fairy, she had gone. He was a real rabbit at last. at home with the other rabbits. Autumn passed, and winter, and in the spring, when the days grew warm and sunny, the boy went out to play in the wood behind the house. And while he was playing, two rabbits crept up from the bracken and peeped at him. One of them was brown all over, but the other had strange markings under his fur, as though long ago he had been spotted, and the spots still showed through. And about his little soft nose and his round black eyes, there was something familiar, so that the boy thought to himself, why, he looks just like my old bunny that was lost when I had scarlet fever. But he never knew that it really was his own bunny, come back to look at the child who had first helped him to be real. The end. The bunny became real. I love that story.
All right, and it looks like I've finished my drawing.
You did it?
Yeah, I did
I
it.
bobbled a little bit and it slowed down. Okay.
So
Sometimes it's
yeah.
hard to read old words. Sort of, from England, and they talk a little differently, and sometimes my Texas tongue bobbles up the old British way of thinking.
Well, I needed every second you gave me to finish this drawing.
So for
But
that,
yeah,
you need to go get the book yourself and read the words and find the ones I messed up just then. But you know what? In the end, the bunny became real anyway.
yeah.
So
So
tell me about
I
your drawing. That's
yeah,
awesome. I
I
don't
took
get to see you because I'm looking at my words.
right. So you don't get to see it until it's done.
Yeah, I just see a
Uh,
little color kind of going over here, and that's awesome.
so yeah, I picked a moment, it happen at sunset, it happened when the moon was up in the story, but this was a little, artistic liberty of I
Yeah,
did a little silhouette of the bunny but getting ready to bestow her magical kiss on the
uh-huh.
little Velveteen Rabbit and turn him into a real bunny. Sitting up on like a little branch in a tree because they were in the woods in that scene. And, I just wanted to put a really nice, pretty, colorful sunset behind them to try to capture the magic of the moment that was happening in the story.
So you just used an interesting phrase, artistic, what?
Artistic license.
License.
Basically, as an artist, not everything has to be entirely realistic.
What?
It's your imagination, and you can imagine anything you want. That's the really cool thing about art, and the cool thing about imagination is nothing is impossible in your own imagination. So I didn't exactly, in the story, there was probably a beautiful moon behind them at night. But I mean, you know what? I like color. I like color a lot, and I want to
Yeah,
put it in everything.
yeah. I like that. And like we were talking last time, it would be fun to see other people illustrate the same story because often when you're reading words, uh, different words will pop out to different people. So moon might catch you, and when the word moon captures your imagination, you begin thinking of all your own experiences of looking at the moon and what it looks like, or the sunrise, or the sunset, or the woods. And the British say wood, but it's really woods. There's more than one wood. I don't know. But that's the beauty of storytelling and with words and with paint. I like that a lot.
Yeah, this is a fun thing, I'm getting to show you what I'm thinking of while I'm listening to you read. But other people may be thinking totally different things, and that's great. And hey, if you're watching this and you feel inspired to draw those words that Blake is reading, feel free to share them with us,
Yeah,
follow
we
us
would
on
love
any of
to.
the social medias and post your own artwork. We'd love to see it and see what these stories conjure up in your mind when you hear these words, because it's going to be something unique and wonderful and special just to you.
I like that idea of whoever's listening, especially if they want to try their hand at art, and then sharing their art with us so that we can see what they saw and what they heard. That would be so exciting for other people, for us to see. I love that idea.
And that's one of my big things. I tell you, everyone's an artist. You just don't know it yet. There's no such thing as bad art. Unless it's just something that you don't want to do or something that you're really not enjoying. But if you're enjoying what you're doing, and then that joy is going to come through in your art and share that joy with everyone that sees it.
Well, I don't know how much time we have, but the story about becoming real, I'm writing my own story, a lot about my own life, and this particular story, the Velveteen Rabbit and becoming real, uh, I really relate to. It's really kind of connected to that question uh, when, that people often ask young people, what are you going to be when you grow up? Um, so I grew up, and I've done a lot of things, but I'm still dreaming and thinking about what I become and what in life has made me feel real. Um, so if you've loved and been loved, what makes you real? And that's an awesome, awesome thing. You're real just the way you are.
And you're always becoming something. That process never stops.
It
Whether you're
never
6
does.
or 60 or 106, it never stops. You're always creating the person that you're going to be tomorrow. That's what you're doing right now today is you're creating the tomorrow version of you. And that person
Yeah,
has
that's it.
unlimited possibilities.
I remember thinking about my parents. I was in my 20s, and I thought if I just get to this age, then life will be um, what it's supposed to be, you
Mhm.
know, and you're no longer, I don't have to worry about things. Well, no, we are constantly becoming something, no matter how old we are, and that's the real truth about life and the real joy about life. And I can't wait to find out what I'm going to be doing in another 5 or 8 years.
So we're just about closing out on time. Do you want to say what we're going to be reading next week, or do we want to surprise people? Or not
Oh,
next week,
let's
next
tell them.
episode.
They might want to read a little. It's a lot of words.
Yeah, it's a big one. We may
It's a
not even
big,
do the
big
whole thing.
story.
This is a big story we're doing next, but it's another one that I really enjoyed as a child, and it's The Wind in the
The
Willows.
Wind in the Willows. A lot of animals, and I don't know if I heard it. I might have heard parts of it, um, but I've had fun reading it, and it's going to take a lot of practice to read some of it.
Yeah, these are all older stories, so it's not quite exactly the same language that we use. I mean, it is, it's English, but just language is another living, breathing thing that changes all the time. So sometimes it may sound a little strange when you're reading words that we don't hear that much anymore, but there's some really fun things, and there's great adventures that happen in Wind in the Willows.
So
And
go out and have
frogs
a
and
great adventure.
badgers.
I know,
Frogs cruising around in
and I
big
can't wait to see what
cars.
you paint.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun. And I love this. I get to draw fun animals all the time. Well, I want to thank everyone who joined us on this journey today, and hopefully you'll keep joining us in the future. If you like what you're seeing, you can like us and subscribe. We are on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we stream live on Twitch, and you can follow our pages, keep in touch with us, and you can buy a book that we happen to work on
Oh,
together.
yes. Should we mention
You
the
can
title
find it
again?
on Amazon. Blake wrote this amazing book. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the book before
Yeah,
we
I
leave
wrote a
today?
book. It's a story I told my daughter when she was in her 20s. We both love children's stories, and she was having a real sad night, and she says, "I just want a bedtime story." Like, oh, she said, "I wish I could have a story." I said, "Do you want me to tell you a story?" And I made this story up, and then eventually wrote it down. And it's just a story about a bunny. It's called The Beautiful Little Bunny and the Crusty Old Turtle. And my daughter's the bunny, I'm the turtle. But when you read it, you can become the bunny. My grandson read it and became one of the other animals that Heather painted in there. It is the most exquisite animal, our little salamander, pink. What's it called?
Axolotl.
Axolotl. I have the hardest time saying that. My grandson has fallen in love with the axolotl, and that might be our next book. But look up the
Yep.
little
Follow
beautiful
us,
little
and
bunny.
we will keep making art and stories and sharing them with you because it's just fun for us.
Yeah, we're having a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Blake. Thank
All
you,
right.
everyone, for being here. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Bye, y'all.